Welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection show features up-and-coming indie authors who sit down with us and talk about their recently released books. Join us as we chat with our next guest author. Hi there, welcome back to Author Roundup. My name is Emma, and today I will be interviewing a very special guest. Today we have self-published author Lukas Bryan of book Blackstar. Lukas Bryan is a seasoned writer who discovered his true passion for creative writing after exploring various fields like computer science and Christian ministry. Based in North Carolina with his wife and daughter, Lukas embraces a nomadic lifestyle while surrounded by close friends and family. Lukas, hi, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very good. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk about your book today. It's a really, really exciting, different book than we've had on the show, so I'm excited to dive into it. But first, can you go over a little bit about your book, an overview of Blackstar?
Yeah, absolutely. So Blackstar is actually my very first book published. Blackstar is a hard-hitting, forbidden love story of a beast who seeks the heart of a human while an insidious entity threatens the resurrection of a war thought to be over.
Oh, wow. Very cool. And so your book dives into the meaning of love and sacrifice in a post-war generation, right?
Mhm.
So how do these themes manifest throughout the story, and what insights do you offer into the characters' motivations and relationships? Because there are like two characters, and main characters have like a really interesting relationship, and so how do those characters and motivations and relationships play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So the world is built up of Fey characters. So there's, for those that are familiar with, the fantasy genre and races within, there's shifter characters. There's characters that resemble more like the fairy or sort of like forest dwelling folk. There's orcs, minotaurs, things of that nature. So imagining yourself as a human in this world, they can get a little scary, a little out there. And of course, there's different cultural aspects to all of them that to make them who they are. Well, the war that sort of struck out in this place has very much created tension amongst all of the races. And because of the effect of war, they have put in place the commission, which is basically to keep balance and to keep the war from repeating itself. And it sort of gets to a point where it becomes a really strong defense mechanism, but it also has sort of instilled the fear in the people as well. So for my characters in it, or at least my main character is one of these Fey folk, and he has to kind of navigate his feelings in the world, but also, where he wants to go, what sort of destiny he wants to have, including, somebody that he chooses to love or believes that he cannot love. So.
Mhm. Okay. And so your book Blackstar takes place in a very like complex world called the Eastern Isles, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you wish readers to be immersed into this setting?
I mean, so the Eastern Isles, I really wanted to have kind of a vague land just because obviously with fantasy, I really want to world build into it. I took a lot of inspiration actually from places that I've traveled. As you read
Cool.
story, I don't want to give too much away on that because
Right, right.
they're all sort of experiences that I've built on, and I hope that people
Okay.
can have that experience as they read.
Right.
But I live in North Carolina and I'm used to being around the water, so definitely wanted to bring that sort of coastal lifestyle into the world for sure.
Oh, very cool. That's so like you've talked about, so there's been a war. They're recovering from a very disruptive war caused by an infectious disease, right? Or something like
Like an entity, yeah.
okay. So how does the background shape the world building and the characters' perceptives perspectives on trust and cooperation? I know you mentioned the commission a little bit, but as far as
Yeah.
like
So
day-to-day life.
yeah, so the commission is built up of sort of a militant sort of force, but at the same time, there's
Okay.
also kind of a religious force that's there as well. The religious force in the world actually have an ability known as the purge, which is think of like fire. It's actually described as a white fire in the story, and it's really the only known thing that can get rid of this infectious entity. So in building that, that's something that they've sort of incorporated into it. And
Mhm.
again, building that throughout the commission, you have to have, kind of have that organization throughout and keep everybody in their place, which unfortunately affects, a lot of the Fae characters as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, so going off of that a little bit, so not giving too much away,
yeah.
so the commission and the Fae races, so how does the dynamic between the two of them influence interactions between the different species in the Eastern
So
Tales as well?
yeah, so I mean, as far as like at least the major conflict in the story, at least what amongst the characters, my protagonist is kind of a shifter.
Okay.
He is strictly set to be a protectorate. He is a protector, a guardian, or a bodyguard, if you will.
Mhm.
And who he protects is actually somebody who's pretty close to the royal family, but she has a gifting with the purge. She actually has the ability to actually completely flow this force through her. Being that she's a seer, also she has a lot of almost that kind of psychic capability where she can see into the future and sort of perceive things before they happen. So with that said, her being kind of in that high rank, if you will,
Yeah.
that that's where I think a lot of the conflict comes in with that. So
Mhm.
there's obviously a lot, there with keeping her safe, keeping her protected, but she also has big goals for herself as well in this conflict as well. While the world is sort of, the entity is sort of coming back. So again, with all these things like the fear and things like that have built in the people, she's got goals to kind of work outside of that, and I think that plays into the love aspect as well.
Okay. Yeah, and what are the 2 central characters? What are their names?
Yeah, so I actually really think I have about three central characters.
Okay.
Kovuco is my protagonist. He is what we refer to as a Volphine. He is sort of a manifestation of a wolf species. There's kind of a holy sort of figure that feeds a wolf his blood, and his blood sort of affects the race and sort of transforms them. And they're sort of shifters where they kind of start out in this sort of beast form and they have
Uh-huh.
abilities to adapt into the actual human form. So
Mhm.
that said, he also struggles a lot with his identity, not only as this beast, but also struggling with his love or his acceptance of people who have treated him so
Mhm.
harshly. Ameilja is my female protagonist. Ameilja is, I think, definitely my main hero character. I really am excited for people to experience Ameilja. Ameilja has enormous goals, um, con- not only to live up to the expectations of her role, but she
Uh-huh.
wants to be back to the beginning when the commission started. She wants to see the
Uh-huh.
commission become strong. She wants to see it unified, and she also wants to see equality amongst the
Mhm.
races. Not see, for example, the Volphine, are protectorates. They're the reason that she's actually alive. So she doesn't want to see them as tools or as monsters, but as friends, as a strong
Mhm.
ally in their success. My third character actually kind of brings in kind of my style of the how the story flows. And his name is
Uh-huh.
Keith. He is also a member of the commission. He is
Uh-huh.
a hunter class. They're called the Volker, which is they're kind of the hunters. Think of like the Witcher almost, where they have all
Mhm.
kinds of potions and tactics and skills, and they're toxologists essentially. They know how to bring you down and not kill you, but if they want to kill you, they absolutely could. They have that
Oh,
capability. But Keeper's another really cool character that kind of brings Kovuco and Ameilja's world into his world, which is
mhm.
where a lot of the action is going to take place.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I didn't know about the 3rd character. I just had read about the 2 main
Uh-huh.
characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Amelia's character already. We love a good strong female character, so that's great.
Yes.
Um, so your book hints at like darker plots and ancient evils threatening the fabric of life. Can you share more about the overarching conflict in the story and the challenges that the characters face in confronting these deaths or threats a little more without
Yeah.
giving too
Yeah.
much away?
So, I mean, the entity that is coming back, think of it as almost, I don't like to use the term zombie, but it really is more of like an undead sort of bringing. There's a lot of
Mhm.
sort of mutative properties of the of this entity as well. it's sort of actually being worked with in secret by the folks within the commission. Leadership within the commission is actually experimenting with this on a lab called the Sunspire. And while they are working with this, it's all in secret because, like they control the Fae, they also want to control the entity as well. They don't want to live in fear of the entity. They want to control it and sort of use it to their own means, which obviously is going to have some consequences along the way. But I'd say that because of having this force at one point almost take over the Isles, the idea of it getting out, it's almost like in Harry Potter, you don't speak Voldemort, or you don't speak in the northwest of the Wendigo. It sort of has that sort of energy to it. But I think that overall, what you're going to get from book one, which is really just the start of this story,
Yeah.
is the world building. Like all of these people actually, working together and how they work together. So
Huh. Very, very cool. So, if you were to go into a bookstore, right, where would Blackstar be located for readers to find as far as its genre? Because I know it's fiction and you use the word fantasy, but is there a specific genre that you want it to be classified in, or you don't want people to misinterpret its genre?
yeah, so I mean, honestly, and this was something really big that we worked with in the process of getting the book
Yeah.
out. I definitely think that it's in the fantasy genre. I think that it's close to a sci-fi genre as well. There's a lot of,
Okay.
if you're familiar with like steampunk sort of
Yeah.
aspects or airships or things like
Right.
that, there's a lot of that in it. I love the idea of, Victorian era going in a different direction where, there's different things that happen in the world that sort of drive technology and culture. And
Yeah.
it's something that I think really gets close to that steampunk genre as well. But being, that Kovuco and Ameilja, I love a good romance. It's
Yeah.
really exciting. The will they won't they factor, but also just seeing how they work and collaborate and grow amongst one another.
Yeah. Well, I love like hearing your passion for your story, and it's like it sounds so interesting and I love it so much. So how where did you get your inspiration from for Blackstar? How did you feel inspired to write it? Where did this all start?
Well, ever since I was little, I watched all the classics, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, especially. I was an early reader, got into the fantasy sci-fi category very early on. I
Yeah.
read all the epics like Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, Redwall. And with all this inspiration, I really wanted to embark on my own story.
Yeah.
Was 17. I was doing my math homework, which I am a terrible math student, but I did a lot of doodles. And I actually one day just sketched out a character on my notes. And on this particular day, I sketched Kovuco. And it's weird, sort of created him, and his story just kind of started filtering through my mind. Even his name, just it was Kovuco. And I don't know
Yeah.
how Blackstar came about, but Blackstar eventually became the working title, and it's been that way ever since. But I knew he'd be a beast. I knew that he would struggle in a human world. I also knew that he'd fall in love with the beautiful woman he believed he could never have. Thus, his story sort of began.
Very, very cool. So are any of your illustrations in the book itself? You said that you doodled him up. Do you have any illustrations in the book?
So yeah, obviously the illustration was back when I was 17. I'm now
Yeah.
34, so that's definitely locked away in the archive. I am working with my cover is actually designed by one of my best friends, and so there's a lot of intimacy into the book and
Mhm.
into construction. I'm hoping to get to that point. There's a lot of obviously as a writer, if you craft a race or a character, there's specifics that are important to you.
Yeah.
It's also important to me that the reader kind of craft that. I love seeing different franchises that come out and hearing the author go, yeah, that's not at all how I pictured the
Yeah.
protagonist. I pictured more of this, but that became the character that became
Yeah.
published to the audience. So I'm kind of trying to keep that open. I do have a map. I did get a map actually constructed, and part of my book signings, I actually have a colored map out there as well. So
Oh, very cool.
yeah.
So you were 17 when the idea came to you. So when did you start and you're 34 now. So when did you start writing your book?
So I mean, Blackstar has gone through many renditions. I actually have an old notebook that I used to carry around school and do my
Really?
own editing, and got a laptop and did all the I mean, my goodness, like so much has changed with technology now, but used to
Yeah.
carry all flash drives. I had flash drives for everything. But I went through a lot of that. I participated a lot in creative writing classes. I had a wonderful English teacher that I'm friends with still to this day. But I'd say that I officially really sat down and felt that the story had matured about 2 to 3 years ago, approximately,
Wow. Okay.
where I really sat down and started to really get the story out and really start fleshing it, but also becoming vulnerable, actually
Yeah.
being able to say, come out to my wife and say, I have this story that I really need to start getting out there, and start to have people sort of go through what's been going in my head for all this time.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of like a self-fulfillment as well as
Yes.
publishing it for readers to read your stories, which is so exciting. So, how does it feel finally being a author, self-published author?
Yeah, so it's very humbling. I really, it's weird. I mean, it's weird to get your book in the mail. It's weird that, you have folks going through an editing, that you're getting feedback from people that you don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
and the other
true.
thing too, just
Yeah.
putting together, well, even putting together the inside of the book, picking how your chapters are going to look, or how the title page is going to look, your own font. You're no longer using papyrus font anymore. You're using a font that has been constructed for you. So
Yeah.
that's all the fun, glittering sort of things, but it's very humbling. I'm
Mhm,
taking it on as a bit of a meditation, because I really
mhm.
want to hone in on this craft and it to be a part of what I do for the rest of my life. I don't want to
Yeah.
retire at this point. I really wish I get to just go until I can't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. So, did anything so you mentioned, like, the editing and things like that. So, was there anything in self-publishing that surprised you, or was there anything that did you know about self-publishing? How did you find out about self-publishing?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually found Archway off of just searching publishers. I wanted to see, what would it be like to reach out to a publisher and just really start
Mhm.
to, you know, beg my way in to
Yeah.
get somebody to take a look at it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, you hit a pretty big brick wall where you need an agent, or all
Right.
these different
Traditional
things.
publishing.
So that was the first little bit of discouragement. But I
Yeah.
stumbled across Archway, which is uh, independent publisher like through Simon and Schuster. And Archway has just really painted some really great opportunities for me to look into,
Mhm.
but also just helped me to put together this really
Yeah.
great story too. But again, that was a big vulnerability piece, just stepping out there and being like,
Yeah.
here you go.
I have this.
What can
Yeah.
we do with this?
Yeah. So what was your so you said that you've taken a bunch of creative writing classes. So you weren't new to writing at all. But how was it writing your own book as far as like the writing process, and did you have like difficulties in or challenges in your writing process specifically for Blackstar?
Yeah, so going back to school with my English classes and whatnot, I had a teacher that taught me all the grammar, all the rules, and things like that. But
Yeah.
she also wanted you to break the rules. She wanted you to come up with your own style and your own voice, so that way your work stood out amongst the others. So that's difficult, because as much as you want to write for yourself, you also
Yeah.
have to write for an
Right
audience.
for
You want to make
audience.
sure that your ideas come off clearly, and also
Yeah.
that you don't make silly mistakes like with airships. They're filled with hydrogen gas, not helium gas, like what we put in balloons and make the Mickey Mouse voice when you breathe it in. Little
Yeah.
things like that. Just that it's sort of discovery along the way. But
Yeah.
I can't emphasize it enough that just being vulnerable and being prepared to receive feedback is huge.
Yeah.
But the other thing that really inspired me growing up was I read Stephen King's book on writing. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, just Stephen King's a very bold speaker on things,
Mhm.
very much speaks his mind, says the quiet part out loud. He's just not afraid.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really stuck out to me was he said, read everything, read.
Mhm.
And even if you don't like what you're reading, keep reading, because
Mhm.
that's a meditation in what not to do, or what you want to work against, or what you're not going to commit in your own work. So
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
that I think that made it easy. That made it that gave me a little bit of empowerment that, like, this is my style. This is how I'm going to go about it,
Yeah,
and just made the process fun. But you know,
that's awesome.
run into your little mistakes, your little things that you say or
Yeah.
whatnot. And that can be a little trippy, but
Sure.
once it's done, you feel a lot better about it.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned, like, the helium and things like that. So, was there any, like, research that you did for, like, a fiction novel?
Uh,
Like, did you do what kind of research
so
did you do for your book?
Yeah, so lots. Again, without giving too much away.
Yes.
The Volphine are sort of a race that is symbiotic on blood. So they were once a wolf species within the Eastern Isle, and they were given
Mhm.
these human properties. And they sort of, to me, sort of had an almost sort of rabbit's paw sort of agreement in getting these abilities. They have to constantly be drinking human blood to basically sustain their human identity. So there is an event where this blood drinking, if you will, becomes very critical to a character. And you always have to think about how much blood can a person give before you have to have a break, or, how much blood is too much blood.
Ooh, yeah.
So I actually spent hours with a cancer doctor. My sister is an ER nurse,
Oh my
so I
gosh.
did a lot of that. Just understand
Wow.
trauma. You can have somebody go through something traumatic, a wound or whatever, but understanding how we prevent that wound from festering and killing you, or
Ooh.
whether you have to lose an arm afterwards, are all things that I
Yeah.
didn't want to dive into.
Yeah.
As you're in fantasy, you can make things up a little bit, but
Yeah.
there's a thousand ways to die, and the doctors use that a lot with that. Another really great example is I actually worked with a whip maker. There's actually a whip that is constructed in Blackstar, and I didn't want to just say, hey, here's a whip. There's a lot, Indiana Jones used the whip.
I was gonna say Indiana Jones.
Well,
That's so cool.
Indiana Jones used a 6-foot whip, and
Yeah.
oh shoot, what was the other? Oh, and Zorro used a 12-foot whip. And I thought, why? Why? What's the difference between 6 foot and 12 foot? And then there's handles. And, I think Zorro used a 10-inch handle, and Indiana Jones was really even. It was like a 6 inch, 6 foot. So I actually got in touch with a whip maker, somebody who actually kind of, talked about these whips and these different sizes,
Wow.
plates, and all these different things. So I reached out to him and said, listen, I'm not buying a whip. I will buy a whip one day, but help me out here. Help me to understand what building a whip is all about. And surprisingly, he really opened up to me and just allowed me to ask questions, and really got into the fantasy aspect of things, and even came up with his own opinions. I told him the type of character that was going to be utilizing it.
That's
And he's
so
like,
cool.
it sounds more cool if you would do something like this. You should do that. So kind of challenged me in what I had already had written
Wow.
down. So
That's so cool. I love that. I mean, research into, like, a nonfiction is like, yeah, that's fun, but, like, into a fiction, I bet that was so fun to just, like, take it to a whole 'nother level, and, like, your commitment to, like, really, like, make sure, like, these facts are right in a fiction, like,
yeah,
that's so cool. That's awesome.
but I'd rather get caught on, you know, helium gas versus hydrogen
Yeah,
gas early on, and not people be, especially when you talk about it like it being flammable. That was actually the standout
yeah.
to my editor, was like, you said flammable.
Oh, yeah.
Helium's not flammable, right? And here's what helium actually is. So yeah, I mean, that would be brutal for somebody to
Yeah.
get, like, okay, this guy's got airships with
Yeah.
helium gas.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Did you so what was a highlight of your writing process? What was your writing process like? Did you have, like, a certain strategy? Did you have a certain, like, routine that you got into for your book?
Yeah, so I really wanted to get into certain tropes. Like, I wanted to pay, especially with where my reading background comes from, I really
Yeah.
wanted to pay homage, or it to show a little bit, again, having my own style, but also kind of
Yeah.
showing where my roots stem from. Played around a lot with first person versus third person a lot.
Okay.
At one point, I had a draft where I literally had 3 points of view. I had Kovuco's point of view, I had Kiefer's point of view, and then Ameilja's point of view. And it just went in order, 3 chapters at a time.
Okay.
It got to be a little bit more challenging because Kovuco is somebody that I am I'm very close to. I feel like I channeled a lot of his personality, and a lot of my arc readers were like, Kovuco's got more effort, and I had to put more work into the other pieces. So eventually I settled on a concept that I'm really, really happy with, and it's actually quite fun going through. But I have third person past tense for the odd chapters, and then it goes into first person past tense for the even chapters. So you get background story or narrator told half of the story, and then you've got Kovuco. Actually, you're actually in his head and really feeling him as a character.
Yeah.
So and that was tough because I had this book written, and then all of a sudden it's like now I have to tear it apart and really bring it back down to earth a little bit. So, which I know Sarah J. Maas just put out her third book in the Crescent series. I'm sorry, her third book in the Crescent City series. And I had heard that she wrote the entire book and then she threw it out. And that was more mind-boggling than what I had to go through. But again, you know what you have to put out there, you know what needs to go, and you know what needs to be worked on.
Yeah. Yeah, and personally, I like multiple different point of views. I think it makes the story super interesting. I think specifically for a fantasy genre, I think multiple points of view is the way to go anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that decision that you made. Um, is there a part of your book that is your favorite, or was there a part of your book that was the most fun to write, or a part that holds a special place in your heart?
Yeah. So again, not trying to give away too much, but
Yeah.
one of the scenes that I worked on in particular, this particular blood scene that I had to do so much research on. This chapter, I think, had the most work. I think it had the most emotional response. And it was, I think, the most challenging in making fit and actually formulating where Kovuco and the Volphine race were going to stand and what was going to make them very unique and something that you could sympathize with even. So it's always going to be a chapter that I hold dear. If you read the book, you definitely know when you hit it, but it was a very intimate scene to me, and it's the climax of the book, and I really think it's gonna put the book where it needs to go.
Yeah. Are you working on a second book?
Yes, I'm actually 50,000 words into my next book. I'm
Wow.
hoping here soon to have some kind of arc ready to go for my arc reading team. So, as I
Cool.
said before, I really want book two to elevate and to continue, but I really want it to be an elevation. I don't want it to be just that sort of bridge that, you know, I don't want it to be a boring second piece. I want it to be an elevation. Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
Fellowship of the Ring was great. Two Towers
Yeah.
was awesome. Return of the
Yeah.
King was Academy Award winning, right? So that's really been my goal for the
Yeah.
next.
Very cool. So have you received any feedback or reviews about your book? Any reception from your family and friends? What did they think when you decided to publish a book?
Yeah. So I have received some really great feedback. I'm actually looking for more and more feedback, both good and constructive. You can only get better with, again, having that vulnerability with your audience. My editors actually wrote back to me that I wrote or I had an engaging manuscript filled with action and heart, and that meant a lot to me. Another review that I had received, you can always title your reviews, but I got a new breed of fantasy novel, which
Ooh,
of course was empowering as well.
that's
Um,
awesome.
I also like the reviews where you again, when you were talking about like how important points of views are,
Yeah.
because you actually have a point of view, you really do get into that character. And again, Kovuco is a character that's grown with me. I mean, if you can imagine being 17 and now I'm 34, hopefully I've grown and matured some over these years. And so therefore the character has such a deep part of me as well.
Yeah.
Getting reviews and having those details picked out really means a lot. It helps me to feel, successful in what I'm doing, but it means a
Yeah.
lot that, that these characters are going to echo after I'm gone.
Yeah. And what about your family? Did they ever think you'd be a writer? Author?
So it's actually, being that it goes back this far, I mean, everybody was just ready for it. It was just finally a sigh of relief and like, finally, you did it.
He gets to, yeah, he's gonna do
So
it.
Yeah. I've always grown up, wanting to make my mom proud, my grandparents proud. They've always pushed me to be the best version of myself. And
Yeah.
that, of course, means a ton. They read through it and then they've got to kind of figure out what's been going on this whole time, these stories. But yeah, it's been really, really great. My very first book signing was actually a release party with friends and family. And
That's awesome.
I would recommend for any writer to do something like that, to have your community gather around you and not only come together to support you, but you kind of recognize how much you're loved and how much you are a part of your community. And it very much gave me that fulfillment. So
That's great. So what advice would you give a first time writer hoping to publish their book, specifically in the fantasy genre or fiction?
yeah, so first and foremost, I would tell any writer to never give up on your writing dreams. If you have a story to tell, whether you're writing fiction, and that's fantasy, historical, etc., the worst thing you can do is not write at all.
Yeah.
And I hope that nobody has to live with the haunt of not completing it.
Yeah.
The thing that I talk with a lot of creative writers on, they have the story and it's just baking on them. And I just always hope that everybody can follow that dream.
Yeah.
Is important if you want to publish your work. Again, you're not writing from your secret diary. You are writing for your audience. Again, you want to think about stories like Lord of the Rings, Fahrenheit 451, Dracula. All these types of tales have lived on and continue to inspire us even after the authors have gone. Stories are meant to be retold, and you should always ensure that your story continues to echo even after you're gone. I think I've touched up on this as well, being vulnerable. One of the biggest hurdles that I have in continuing to perfect my craft is being prepared to share your work. I have editors and readers, and it's not easy being in the hot seat, but it is essential to this craft.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think was my biggest takeaway, especially talking about like the doctors and things like that. Think of yourself not just as a novelist, but as a journalist. You want to step out of your comfort zone, challenge what you don't know, and deepen your understanding of a subject that's outside of your scope of knowledge. Don't accept things for what they are. Always ask why. Always be curious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's all really good advice. What you said about that I've noticed with a lot of authors that I talk to is that they hated the idea of thinking about what they wanted to write over and over and over again every single day. And so
Yeah.
to stop actually just thinking about, well, what if, just say, okay, well, I'm going to do this so I won't have to you know,
Yeah.
punish myself and get it out there. So yeah, that's really good advice. And then I like what you said about the journalist, right? Like that's like think of yourself as a journalist
Yeah.
and to not I feel like also touching on that, you may have like a concept of what you want to write about. I mean, fiction's a little different from like a memoir, I guess, because memoirs, like your life. But I think it's good for writers and authors to think that what they think day one might not be exactly what is the result when they're
Yeah.
done. So just
Yeah.
like open. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And going with memoirs too, it's kind of looking at the concept of, villains and heroes. I know
Yeah.
that these are older concepts that have come out, but, a lot of stories, or at least a lot of my favorite stories, is where you've got a villain. But you got to kind of wonder what makes them do what they do, and are they really
Right.
the villain the whole time? And heroes, it's a matter of following along their journey, seeing what experiences have formulated them to do what they do. A hero rises to action because something is going on, and
Yeah.
tell the story the way it is. You don't want to leave out the flaws. You don't want to leave out the mistakes. You don't want a character that's just super and
Yeah.
vulnerable. You want vulnerability. You want to be able to relate to the character. And I think that's why memoirs are so important as well. So you're in a way crafting someone else's memoir. They may not be real, but they could
Yeah.
be. They could be to somebody.
Yeah. So where do you want Blackstar to go this year? Do you have any professional or even personal goals for this year?
Yeah, I actually have recently put out a offset print, which is a different printing method. It gave me a little more creativity in putting the book together. So I do have a really beautifully crafted book right now that I'm really excited to get out there. Obviously, I'm trying to get it out there. I'm just trying to find
Yeah.
folks who want to read it. The social media aspect has been wonderful.
Oh,
I
great.
actually my TikTok shop, which again I'm still learning TikTok entirely, but my
Yeah.
wife, who is super creative, has actually put together a really cool special for my book. If you actually order
Okay.
from my TikTok shop, you'll get a signed copy, but she
Oh,
will also put
cool.
together something like this. So as
Ew.
it's filled with stickers and bookmarks, we do actually have some custom bookmarks that we made special for the book. And yeah, I love receiving stuff like this for a book. You know, you can go to Barnes and Noble and pick up the book, but you can get something like this and
That
really
is
get a
so
taste of the
cool.
story. Yeah, yeah.
I
So,
love the stamp too. I love the little
oh
like
yeah,
blood stamp. Oh my God, that's
a little
amazing.
wax. Yep,
Little wax.
yep.
So cool. Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah. So
amazing.
but yeah, but that's really my biggest thing right now. I want to get some book signings in. I have been working to get the book out there more on social media. Been
Yeah.
working with coffee shops and independent
Very cool.
bookstores. You know, just see, you know, hey, do you want to put it on the shelf? I
Yeah.
even here down in town, I was actually talking, just again going out and doing my journalistic duties out there, and somebody who has like antique clothes shop wants to put the book out because there's shops all along the stretch that kind of work with the genre, but also kind of create
Yeah.
theme of the street. So, you know, things like that are just really cool to have as well.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's so creative. Yeah. Are there any like book con like events that would be perfect for your book? Have you
Yeah.
researched that or?
So going back to Star Wars, there is actually a event here in my town that I'm hoping to get involved with, where it's a charity. It
Mhm.
works. It's kind of like a Comic Con where you know they're raising money for charity and things like that, and
Yeah.
trying to see if I can get involved with that. But the other thing is just kind of looking out there, working with my marketing team, and seeing what
Mhm.
opportunities are out there. But social media really creates great opportunities for you to
Yeah, it really
really
does.
reach out to people. I actually have a really great video on TikTok that I took a lot. Obviously, I have a beast and beauty sort of concept. So Disney Beauty and the Beast was another one of my favorites growing up. You know, putting
Mhm.
together a TikTok video with the elements of that, and then sort
Yeah.
of wrapping that up
Work as
into
in
the
your
story
book.
that you're working with. I mean, that gets people. That's a story people want to be told again, and
Okay.
it's really been helpful.
That's cool. What's your TikTok for everyone to go
Yeah.
find you?
Yep. So I'm actually on TikTok. I'm working on X and Instagram as well, but you can
Okay.
find me at Lucas Author or Lucas Ryan Author. I should pop right up at that point.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have, but I do have one last question for you.
Yeah.
What impact do you hope your book Blackstar has on readers?
So a few things. A few things. One, obviously, with me talking about, you know, don't give up on your writing dreams. Kovuco's got a lot that he's got to get through, not only to meet his goals or his destiny, but also for him to, you know, to earn the girl that he doesn't think he can have. There's a lot of growth that he's going to have to get through. There's a lot of challenges that he's going to have to take on, and he's going to have to look in the mirror and learn to accept who he is. And I think that's a powerful thing in our culture right now, is being able to look in the mirror and like the person that you're seeing, but also know that that person can be better the next day.
Mhm.
So that, and with the post generation war, our past doesn't define us. Our past is something we can look at and emulate to be better. You'll notice a lot of characters in my story are sons and daughters of men and women who have gone through the war, and moms and dads are all about the war. The kids now
Mhm.
have to carry on the future and make the future better. So
Mhm.
those are some elements that I really hope will stick with Blackstar.
That's great. Oh, okay. Actually, one more question. So, what is your favorite fantasy novel slash series of all time?
I gotta hand it to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was, my
I
goodness, I
like
think I
the
was 8 or 9 when I read it. So, you know, if you've ever gone through Lord of the Rings,
Yeah,
it was the biggest challenge that I embarked
it
on as
really
a
was.
young
That
reader.
and Hobbit too. Oh my
Ah,
god.
yes. Hobbit
Hobbit's
was
even
actually,
better, I think.
and I've read The Hobbit over and over and over. I don't understand it. It's
Really.
just
I
it's the
know,
most
it's hard.
contagious book.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's my favorite, but it's so hard. I mean, I've got this massive bookshelf behind me,
yeah,
and books are a terrible addiction.
yeah,
Every
they
time
are.
I go out, I see a bookstore, and I just go, don't. You don't need another book. You've got too many books as is. But I do. I love books, and as much as I want to go out and get the next author's book, I hope that I get to join the ranks.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was so great having you and talking with you. And it's very obvious your passion and your love for writing. And we're so happy you found a love for writing. And thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And if you, a reader out there, if you're watching this or listening and you want to purchase Blackstar by Lukas Bryan, you can head to archwaypublishing.com or Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or please go to his TikTok so you can buy it from his TikTok shop so you can get that bundled book. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.